Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Deku became the super soldier part 2. If you guys enjoy this what if and want to see part 3, comment down below and let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content and leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and also share this video with your friends and check out the description in my playlist. The author of the story, TriggeredIida from Wattpad. So let's start the video. Okay class, today you will be meeting a retired hero. He used to be the number 2 hero, before he grew old and weary. I already knew who it was, and visibly shook in my seat. I present to you. The door to the classroom opened, revealing an old man, sketching something into a notebook. Stan Lee, the hero of imagination. Aizawa, for the first time, actually sounded impressed for the first time. Stan continued to draw while everyone in the classroom started to freak out and talk amongst themselves about how cool of a hero he was. Hello everyone, it's me, Stan Lee. 𝗧𝗪𝗓, he said somewhat weakly once he looked up from his notebook, which was expected, since he was older than anyone else in the room. I got up from my seat and walked towards Stan. Oh, Izuku, I didn't know you would be here. Glad to see you again, he said happily. Here? A rose appeared from thin air, but it wasn't normal. It had multicolored petals, purple, white, and red to be precise. Wait, 𝗵𝗃 jumped on top of his seat and pointed his finger at me. Hold on Deku. How do you know the previous number 2 hero? He asked, but was punched back down by Katsuki, who sat next to him. Yeah, Perv boy is right. How do you know him, you useless Deku? He looked like he was angry, since his hand was stuck to 𝗵𝗃's grape hair. Sparks came from his hand as he lifted the poor boy from the ground. Oh, he's my Gramps. Way out. Everybody in the class shouted at once. I covered my ears, while Stan just stood there with his hearing aid disabled. Geez. Calm down, my ears can't take this, Aizawa said as the class calmed down. What the F do you mean he's your Gramps? Katsuki said. He was standing and currently shaking 𝗵𝗃 around. Don't use that kind of language, Bakugo-san, Ida ordered as he stood up from his seat walking towards him. Soon enough almost everyone stood up from their seats and shouting random things. I saw Ida trying to actually help Katsuki by pulling on 𝗵𝗃's legs. Stop, just let me pluck off my hair, 𝗵𝗃 shouted as he was being pulled apart. Katsuki stopped pulling and listened to the boy. 𝗵𝗃 fell on his face when he plucked the purple orb from his head. I saw Aizawa yawn and slip into his classic yellow sleeping bag. Does this usually happen? Stan asked as he dusted the jacket that he was wearing. Kind of, I said as I scratched the back of my head and sighed. So, Izuku, how come you never talk about your Gramps? Momo asked. She was standing near me. I didn't really want to brag about Stan, since he was the number 2, I chuckled and blushed. Since I was talking to my crush, what? How come you don't talk to your girlfriend about your cool grandpa? He sounded angry. Both of us blushed. I was embarrassed, and so was she. I heard the furious scrawling of his pen, a long paper. Take this, you insolent child. A hammer, that closely resembled one of his fictional characters' weapon, appeared out of thin air and hit me over the head. Lightning came out of Mjolnir, a weapon he used to show me when I was younger. It shocked me, albeit it was a weak shock. It still hurt like hell though. I was sprawled out on the ground with a massive headache. Izuku. I could feel Momo put her hands on me. I'm fine. I was sitting up with a bandaged head. No you're not, you might have a concussion, Izuku, Momo said, as she helped RG examine my head. I told you, I'm fine. Just let's Stan in here, I pleaded with both her and Recovery Girl. Oh. He's the one that injured you like a fool. RG said she was aggravated easily by idiots. The handle to the door was trying to go down, but it was locked so it only moved a little bit. I'm coming to save you, Izuku. The door was knocked down and there stood the Hulk. One of his famous fictitious characters that I knew a lot about. He walked in using his cane that he had around his waist. Get out of this room, you'll only make things worse. RG shouted at him. Don't worry. I'm not here to cause the types of mayhem I did back in my heyday. I just came to fix Izuku. He continued to walk towards me, and I saw that he already had something drawn in that notebook of his. It was a pill of some sort. Here, this should fix you right up, Izuku. He smiled at me apologetically, but everything was blurry due to the amount of electricity that flowed through my body. He held out the pill that I saw in his notebook and offered it to me. What is that supposed to do? Kill him? RG was just blowing her lid, and I had no clue as to why. But I still took the pill despite not knowing what it does. After I swallowed it, a faint light came from my arms. The light spread through my entire body, and I levitated out of the bed slightly. Immense pain spread with the light. I opened my mouth in an effort to scream, but yellow light came out of it. What did you do to him, Stan? I heard Ard yell. I felt hands try to bring me down to the bed. Don't worry, it should wear off in 3, 2, and 1. As soon as he finished the countdown, I started to dim, and I felt better than before. I felt stronger than I had before, and felt like I could see for miles. What was in that? I asked as I received glares from the two women. Really, Izuku? That's what you say after you literally glowed as bright as the sun. I could tell that Momo was in a bad mood, and really at Gramps. It was able to heal you up in an instant, and make you stronger than before. He seemed like he had already forgotten what the pill did. What if you died? Momo yelled. She caught my attention, and I could tell that she was on the verge of tears. It wouldn't have Yamamo. I took her hands in mine. You just gotta trust my crazy grandfather. She looked me in my eyes and started to cry. She hugged me and cried into my ear. I rubbed circles into her back to soothe her. She must have been afraid, because I could have died. I knew that if I wasn't blessed with this quirk of mine, I would have been easily killed by Stan all day. I walked back to class, with Momo burning holes in the back of Gramps' head. She was still at him, despite him healing me up all the way. When an alarm blared through the halls. Code Red, villains have infiltrated the school. Code Red, villains have infiltrated the school. A voice that could only be known as the principal said through the PA system the school had. I looked at Momo and she looked at me. I nodded and she nodded back. Stan, go find someplace to hide. We'll take care of the villains. I pointed towards a closet nearby and started to push him towards it. I can handle myself. They didn't call me the number 2 for nothing. He was full of himself. Gramps, these aren't your glory days. You won't be able to handle a villain attack. I was still pushing him towards the closet when Thor appeared beside him. Trust me, kid, I've never been able to handle a villain by myself. That's why I have my friends. He looked at Thor triumphantly and was picked up by him. See you there? Since Thor had Mjolnir in his hand, he could fly, and so did. I looked at them in shock. Come on, Izuku, we can't let him get hurt. Momo snapped me back to my senses. You're right. I picked her up and started to run after him. We have to stop him. I ran faster than I had before. The pill really did wonders for me. I ran through countless hallways at an insane speed, probably around 30 to 40 miles an hour, until I caught up with a stopped Thor. I skidded to a stop and looked forwards. There stood dozens of villains from his countless stories, like Mephisto, Dr. Doom, and even the Green Goblin, which all came from different stories within his universe of heroes. But most notably was a darker and younger version of Stan Lee, with something in his pitch-black forehead. It was white. 𝗧𝗵𝗲𝗄𝐻𝗍𝗵𝗃𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍 his voice made my spine crawl. "Ah, remind me how long it's been since I sealed you away." 40, number 50 years. Yeah, it was 50 years. Suddenly, heroes started to appear from nowhere. There was Spider-Man, Captain Marvel, and my personal favorite, as to which I named my quirk, Captain America, the super serum injected man. "Hey Izuku, wanna do me a favor?" asked Stan. I looked at him and nodded. The heroes rushed towards the villains, but they were severely outnumbered. "Let me draw you real quick." He opened up to a fresh page and began frantically drawing. I knew I couldn't move at all, so I just watched in horror as the heroes were torn apart. There really was an imbalance between the heroes and villains within his stories. And done. By the time he was done, the only hero that was standing was Captain America, but only on a thread. He was being destroyed by all the villains, who never seemed to end. But He was finished by Ultron, which was a surprise to him. You ready to fight Izuku? He seemed weaker than before. I am. I walked towards the villains slowly. They were desecrating the corpses of the dead by mincing them up with random psychokinetic powers from 𝗵𝗃 and company. Then go. Dozens of myself appeared from nowhere. 𝗧𝗵𝗵𝗃. All the duplicates of myself shouted as they jumped towards the villains. They handled fairly well against the opposing forces, but they were still outnumbered. So some had to take on 2 or more enemies. I ran into the fray and spotted the darker version of Stan, but he was huge and covered in the venom symbiote. Use fire Izuku. I saw a flash of light from behind me. Here, Izuku. I turned around to Momo throwing a flamethrower towards me. Thanks. I turned back to the venom Stan Lee and jumped at it. I slammed face first into a force field that was around him, so I destroyed it with my strongest punch. My arm broke, but the light came back and fixed it back up. Nice. I dodged a stab from another villain and jumped towards his face. I pried open his jaw with one of my hands and shoved the flamethrower in before it could take me into itself. Burn you mother effer. I pulled the trigger on it and lit the son of a beach up from the inside out. The symbiote screeched and burned to death, leaving behind the original 𝗧𝗪𝗧𝗏. I walked towards him and grabbed him by the neck. I punched him straight in the crystal and shattered it. 𝗬𝗏𝗺𝗺𝗃 and 𝗬𝗏𝗺𝗺𝗃𝗍𝗍𝗺𝗔𝗡𝗍𝗔. His body started to break and chip away. Underneath was a small entity that was in all the light around it. It started to grow and 𝗧𝗂𝗍 in more light, until it took in all of the heroes and villains. I live again. Everything went silent. The world was pulled towards the creature who started to move. Then, everything was pushed back and put back to normal. I looked at it and saw nothing. It just looked like the vast emptiness of a void. I quickly got up and dashed towards the entity. I threw a punch towards it. No. Don't touch him Izuku. Stan shouted from behind me. I felt my fist start to spin and get in by him, so I jumped back and saw my hand start to bleed and go back to normal. There's no way we can defeat him now, we have to run. He sounded utterly frightened. Maybe he created this? I thought. I turned around and picked up Momo, then Stan, and started to run in the opposite direction. Is there any way to defeat him? Momo asked as I ran at a fast speed. Yes, but we have to be quick about it. He pulled out his sketchbook and started to flip pages until he found the page. Here it is. He showed me a picture of the entity. We just have to have it 𝗧𝗂𝗍 up a person with this seal on them. It was a fist holding a pen in it. I recognized it since it was on my right shoulder blade. How do we find them? Momo asked again. I stopped so suddenly that I almost dropped the 2 of them. For the entity was in front of us. Izuku, just get me close to him, Stan said calmly. I put down Momo. What do you plan to do, Gramps? I was worried. Don't, just bring me closer to him. I didn't want to question him, so I ran closer to it. Suddenly, Spider-Man was in front of me. He punched me in the face and took Stan from my shoulder. Goodbye, Izuku. We had a grand time together, didn't we? Spider-Man ran with Stan towards the entity. Oh, Gramps. I stood up, dazed by him. He can't do this. Oh. I ran towards him, but the alternate forms of Spider-Man appeared and tackled me to the ground. Oh. I started to cry as I saw Stan get into the entity. Excelsior, I heard him say. He saluted me and was into it. He glowed white, and the light enveloped everything. I became blinded and felt the weight of all the Spider-Men and women disappear. The light died down and it was gone. I got up hundreds of feet away from where I was and ran towards where the entity was. On top of all the rubble was the white crystal that I had shattered. I collapsed onto my knees and bent over it. But why did you fix what I caused? I cried onto the crystal and picked it up. I felt a hand on my shoulder, and I looked to see Momo. He died because of me. I wanted to bring him back and swap places with him, but I couldn't. He chose to die. Just know that he didn't blame you for anything. I wanted comfort, and she was exactly what I needed. Her arms were wrapped around my body, and I was crying in pain into the sky. Since this whole portion of the school was destroyed by the flash of light. Excelsior, Excelsior, my old friend, Izuku POV. After everyone had taken their seats, a man dressed in yellow came into the room. Good morning, Aizawa-sensei, everyone said collectively. Morning, he waved at us and stood at the podium. Not to drop something big on you, but in a week or so, you will be temporarily interning with a hero, one that has put in a special request to have you. Everyone's faces lit up with pure amusement, even mine. We usually have the requests more spread out per person, but here are the orders put in for everyone. He grabbed a remote from his desk, as everyone started excitedly chatting between each other. The wall behind him was replaced with a screen revealing the number of heroes for each person. It's organized by the rank each of you placed. Here is every individual hero that a person had. He then laid down behind the podium and slept. Despite the excited roars of the class, I looked at the top 3 spots. Each spot had a significant voter. In third place was Momo. She had 674 orders placed in, one of which was 𝗬𝗵𝗵𝗃, the snake hero. In second place was Katsuki, with 1,230 votes. The most significant one was from a man named 𝗳𝗄𝗏. Finally, was me. With an astounding 3,968 votes, some even came from overseas. But the most significant one was from All Might. I looked down to last place, not caring about All Might. I saw Todoroki in last place, with only 1 vote, from Endeavor of all people. His own father probably had no clue what was going on with him. Izuku. All Might wants you to intern with him, that's so manly. Kirishima was sitting in the seat behind me. I guess, but I don't really want to intern with him. The room quieted down, and I could feel over 20 pairs of eyes on me, including Aizawa's. I looked up from the sheet of paper in front of me, and looked at my silent classmates. What? I don't really want to intern with the number 1. You are an idiot, Midoriya. This is the number 1 hero we're talking about. Mineta shouted at me. A tick mark grew on my forehead. I turned slowly to Mineta. What did you just call me? Mineta became frightened. Looking back on his past, he probably shouldn't have said that. Nothing, I said nothing. Good, let it stay that way. I cooled down. I just think that I wouldn't learn too much. I just think that I'll take Endeavor's offer. Todoroki stopped spacing out, and looked at me with a shocked face. Though I didn't notice him, I just thought about why it would be bad to intern with AM. First, he would probably be in his regular form most of the time. Second, I didn't want to be with my mom's lover that much. What about you, Momo? Who are you going to intern for? Noise started back up in the class as almost everyone started to speak. I don't know, it's either 𝗬𝗵𝗵𝗃 or Ryuko the Dragoon hero. I nodded. Makes sense. I would personally go with Ryukyu because she hasn't fallen to fame as much as the snake hero. What about you, Katsuki and Iida? I want to intern with Best Jeanist. He is in the top 3 for a reason. He tilted back in his chair and smirked arrogantly. Iida stayed quiet, so I looked to his significant hero. It was Ingenium, which was most likely his brother or father. Is it Ingenium Iida? I an eyebrow and bored a hole into the back of his head with my fiery gaze. Yes, I am interning with my big brother's agency. He was still holding some info from me, and I wanted to know if something was wrong with him. I saw Aizawa rise up from the ground. *yon**, that should be enough time. Now, there will be a special person coming in to help you all. At that moment, the door slid open, and Ms. Midnight stood there in her hero costume. I'm here to help you all decide what your hero names are for the future and the internships. Now, here are some tips to help you decide on your names. Try for something simple, cute, or easily recognizable by the masses. I already had a name in mind, and it was after one of my favorite characters from my grandfather's stories. I raised my hand. Yes, Midoriya. I'd like to present my hero name. Sure, you can go ahead. The rest of you should continue thinking about one if you haven't already. I got up from my seat and walked up to the podium. I want to be known as. I activated my quirk and started to overclock it, causing me to glow slightly. Captain America, the heroic soldier. Everyone that wasn't thinking about their name was pretty amazed at the name. What a great name, Midoriya. Does anyone else want to go? Katsuki surprisingly raised his arm. Go ahead, Bakugo. He walked over to the podium as I sat down. He held out his arm in front of him and started to release explosions from it. My name will be 𝗧𝗵𝗃, the volatile hero. Good name, but might be too explosive for some people anyone else. She asked, afraid of anything other names like 𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗧𝗏. Iida raised his hand robotically. Let's go, get up here Tenya-san. He stood up and spoke sternly yet quickly. I'll be known as 𝗳𝗍𝗄𝗏, the turbo hero. Great name, but why take after the actual hero? I asked before Midnight could say something. His stoic pose at the podium became sullen and weakened, as if he didn't want to hear it. Tu couldn't really think of a better name Midoriya-san. I could tell that he forced himself to say that. I gave him a look that meant that you can talk to me about anything you need. He understood me because he nodded lightly. Whoever wants to go next can take the podium then. Momo raised her hand, get up there. She pointed at her, so she went to the podium. She slid down one of her arm sleeves and created kanji of a word. I'll be 𝗧𝗍𝗄𝗏, the creative hero. The lettering she created meant creative. Wow, what an amazing name Yaoyorozu. If anyone else wants to volunteer themselves, then you can go up. But nobody did, so after a few moments Midnight spoke up. Then we'll start with Todoroki-kun, come up here. He was looking off into the corner of the room again, so I stood up from my seat. I went over to him and picked him up. He seemed unfazed by this though. I walked him over to the podium and set him down. I flicked him on the head, setting him back to normal. What was that for? He held his forehead in pain. You were called to come up here to say your hero name. Oh, then my hero name will be Shoto, and just that? He was still staring something in the corner of the room, like he was staring it down. Really? Just Shoto? Questioned Midnight, so Todoroki nodded, not speaking as he went back to his seat. I walked back to my seat. Even though he was with the villains, I felt like something was wrong with his mental state. First day of internships, I was at the train station talking with Iida, while waiting for Todoroki to come and join me to go to Endeavor's agency in Hosu. So Iida, I know why you took up your brother's hero name. I put my arm on his shoulder, since he was only a tad bit shorter than me. And I want you to know that if you go down the path of revenge, then you won't ever be able to be at peace again. I looked into his eyes as I said this. What do you mean Midoriya? I'm only here for my internship. Iida both you and I know the real reason. He started to sweat, and I saw his hand tense at his side. Yeah, but you don't know what I'm going through right now. You could never understand. He gripped my shoulders tightly. You could never know the pain of having your brother. Won't be able to walk ever again. All because of a villain. I put my arm on his forearm and looked him in the eyes. You're right, Iida, but that still doesn't make it right to hunt down and maybe kill a villain for revenge. Especially someone like Stain, who is leagues above you. I just don't want to see my friend be hurt. He was on the verge of tears. Trust me, Midoriya-san. I won't get into a fight with Stain. I could tell that he was unaffected by most of my words. Alright, though if you do need me, don't be afraid to ask me. He looked up at my eyes, and I could see a twinge of guilt within them. Thank you, Midoriya-san. I won't forget what you've told me. ****, the train headed for downtown Hosu is now boarding. It will depart from this station at 10:34 and arrive in Hosu at 12:12. Thank you, and have a good rest of your day. Well, I gotta go, Midoriya. I'll see you after the internships. He then ran off to the platform the train was on. Where is Todoroki? I told him that he should be here before Iida left. What's taking him so long? I pulled my phone out of my pocket and started to text Momo. So Momo, when are you going to be at the Dragoon Hero offices? 𝗧𝗍𝗄𝗏, actually, I'm already here. Well, the Dragoon Hero just let you take a picture of her. That's so cool. 𝗧𝗍𝗄𝗏, yeah, but we won't be starting the internship until tomorrow. Sad face. That sucks. I was supposed to meet Todoroki, but he hasn't gotten here yet. I looked up from my phone and saw fire break out. I put my phone away and ran towards it. What could possibly? That makes sense actually. It was Todoroki, and he was using his quirk. Shudo, what are you doing? I shouted as I walked towards him. He seemed to be in a sort of semi-subconscious state. You were using your quirk, Are you even okay to be taking an internship? The fire was gone, so I gripped his shoulder, making him look directly at me and focus. Ever since you came back from the villains, you've been weird. Is there something you want to say, 𝗳𝗧𝗪𝗧𝗧? I wanted to bury all the things he did in the past, even if he wasn't under the control of a quirk or something. No. It's just been weird, not having memories of the past few months. What do you mean by that? I started walking and he followed. I only remember my life before the USJ attack. But only halfway through that, and then everything else is just murky. I took in all of the details that he told me. Something had to have happened during the attack. Maybe he was portaled away at some point and was put under a quirk that is similar to 𝗳𝗪𝗧𝗏. Or all of what he's saying is a lie, and I should put him behind bars before he could put me in the ground. Come on, we have to get going to our internship under your dad. I pulled him along to the platform we were supposed to go on. What? 𝗧𝗪𝗧𝗏 screamed as I ran fast to the train that had already left. Get ready. We were on the tracks when I started to run alongside it. I caught up to the train after 3 or so minutes of running. A kid was looking through the window when he saw me and looked excited. I waved at him and sped up even faster as to get past the train. Let's never do that again. 𝗳𝗧𝗪𝗧𝗏's hair was pointing to the left due to all the wind that pushed against him. It was going to be stuck like that for a while. Maybe. I looked at a clock on the wall. We only had 3 minutes to get to Endeavor's hero office. But not anytime soon. I grabbed his arm and jumped out of the station towards the tallest building in Hosu. I heard 𝗳𝗧𝗪𝗧𝗏 scream as I glided through the air. I looked to the building next to me. There was me, 𝗳𝗧𝗪𝗧𝗏, and something that was holding on to him. Though it was only a glimpse, I was frightened. I landed on the ground as fast as I could, and looked at his leg. But there was nothing there. Why do you keep jumping off? He stood up and held his head. Did you see that? See what? The thing grabbing onto your leg? He seemed distressed as he looked down at his own leg. His eyes widened as he stared at nothing. Did you see it now? He asked. His quirk activated and ice creeped onto his leg. No, what is it? It's what has been following me ever since I woke up in the cell under you. I don't even know what it is. Even though I couldn't see it, its invisible presence was overwhelmingly heavy. I looked up at the building and saw something dark move back onto it. I'll be back. I jumped into the sky before 𝗳𝗧𝗪𝗧𝗏 could say anything else. I fell on top of the roof and saw a robed figure run towards a shadowy, purple portal in the ground. Stop right there. As soon as I touched solid ground, I jumped towards the figure. But before I could grab him, a wall came up from the ground, blocking my path as I slammed face first into it. The wall slid back down into the ground, and I saw 2 people go into the portal instead of just one. I slammed my fist into the ground and didn't break it. Who were they anyway? Standing up, I closed my eyes and pinched the bridge of my nose. I opened them to see the figure that was holding onto 𝗧𝗪𝗪𝗧𝗏 right in front of my face. It was a rotting skeletal figure with BLD covering it. It had its mouth open, which showed off a dark abyss inside. I back-flipped away from the skeleton as I kicked it in the jaw. My breathing was heavy and not steady. What the F was that? Izuku POV, what the F was that? I fell to the ground and backed up onto a wall. I clutched my easy as I took in deep breaths. Nothing on the roof of the building looked out of place. What is that? And why was it attached to 𝗳𝗧𝗪𝗧𝗏? I got up on wobbly legs and walked to the edge of the roof. But this wasn't of my own free will. I got up on the ledge of the roof, the part that blocked jumpers, and climbed over it. Why can't I control myself? The skeleton peered over me. It was on my back controlling my movements. My body turned around and started to fall backwards, putting the arms out to each side of my body. I fell faster than I could even run, so there would be no coming back from this. The only parts of my body I could control were my eyes and mouth. 𝗳𝗧𝗪𝗧𝗏, I shouted about 6 seconds from impacting with the ground, at him. He turned his direction to the sky. I saw his eyes widen. Quickly ice appeared in a cylinder fashion, with a growing fire within it. By the time I hit anything, it was the surface of the pool 𝗳𝗧𝗪𝗧𝗏 had just created. Having regained the feeling in my limbs, I swam to the surface of the ice-cold water. I gasped for air as I broke through the surface, I swam to the rim of the ice basin. 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗏. Why did you jump off the building like that? I climbed out. I was soaked to the bone with freezing water. I didn't. I wasn't even in control of my own body. Look. We'll talk about it later. We gotta see your dad for our internships. I subconsciously took off my shirt and started to dry it with my hands. Fine, later it is. He's a fairly moody teen, surprised he isn't an emo. I started to follow behind him. I could feel all the women that I passed by look at my upper body, and some even tried to talk to me. It's Izuku 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗏, the winner of the UA Sports Festival. What? He's so appealing. There was a small crowd gathering on the other side of the road. They all had green hair, making it all the more creepy. I think you should put your shirt on, Izuku. Oh really, Sherlock? I clearly didn't know 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗃. I took my damp shirt and put it back on. Todoroki opened the door to his offices and walked into it. I followed after him. So Todoroki, what is your dad like anyway? I mean, from the way he acts as a hero, I could only assume he's a dash. I walked into something solid and fleshy. I looked up to see a man with a fiery beard. He's a what? That just proves my suspicions. Nothing, except that you must seem like a wonderful man, Todoroki-san. Demon right, kid. Now, follow my sidekick, he'll show you around. He then walked out of the building, leaving behind a trail of burning footprints. Geez, what was in his coffee? I asked Todoroki. He wholeheartedly laughed for the first time, so I felt accomplished. A man in a red jumpsuit came out of nowhere, causing Todoroki and I to jump. But where did you even come from? The man was in my face within a moment. Because I am Mysterio, Endeavor's most trusted sidekick. Besides, he was resting on top of my head with just his arms. I can do anything. That pertains to teleportation, he mumbled quickly. Our bags were suddenly missing, but I saw Mysterio give them to the person at the front desk. Now, he was walking towards an elevator. The two of you should follow me. I have to prepare you for our nightly patrol. He opened an elevator and clicked the one button that I didn't want him to. The doors of the elevator started to close, while we were still standing in place. I ran towards the door while Todoroki sent ice to stop it from closing. The doors were stuck due to the ice, so I ran to the doors and pried them open. Todoroki 𝗵𝗃𝗏 was behind me, ran through the doors, and I followed him. He melted the ice holding the doors together, and the elevator closed, and started to move. We both looked at the sidekick menacingly, wanting to kick his, but I started to walk towards him. But Todoroki held my shoulder, effectively stopping me. I walked back to the wall and leaned on it, but was thrown to the ground when the elevator suddenly stopped. It creaked as we all looked up to the roof of it. A loud snap could be heard, and down we went. The elevator started to head for the ground. I looked to Mysterio, to see him gone. God damn it. I grabbed Todoroki's hand that was on the ground, and pulled him up. I then jumped up with a fist, breaking a hole through the service hatch and flying through the hold on Todoroki. We sailed through the air, until I caught a glimpse of an open door. We flew to the ceiling and came down fast. So I grabbed a ledge that was right above the open door, to make Todoroki swing into the room. Without any control though, I let go of the ledge and grabbed onto the one directly below me. I climbed into the room, to see Mysterio frozen in ice. Good call, Todoroki. I took a deep breath and flicked the ice, causing it to shatter into 1,000 pieces, but Mysterio was still entirely intact. What the hell? That is no way a hero in training should act. I was this close to punching him. I guess so. But you aren't acting like a hero, so why should we? My eyes started to go crazy, and I towered over the man. So he started to fold inwardly, until he got so scared he teleported away. Ahem. If you'd follow me, he bowed, but nothing on Iida's scale. I found myself amazed by the amount of hero tech that was present in the rather large room. You may take one item from this room with you on tonight's patrol. You have 5 minutes to pick and choose. I looked at everything on the walls and saw something familiar. I walked towards the device. It was a small metal bracelet that when activated should have activated a suit that went around the person, similar to Iron Man here, Todoroki. You should take this. I threw him the bracelet. It's a portable iron suit. He then threw something at me. It builds up the pressure from punches, and releases that as a shockwave. Both of us caught our respective items at the same time. I looked at my item, it was more like a fingerless glove than anything. 'Cause it literally fit like a glove on my hand. Alright we're good to go. I looked to see Todoroki press the button that activated the actual suit. It started to unfold and consume his body. You like it? 'Cause that was invented by my Gramps. He clicked a button on the side of the helmet. His face was lit up like a child's. This is the first time I've ever seen him this happy or excited. No? He asked in surprise. I nodded as we walked with Mysterio. I pressed the elevator buttons, causing the door to open. I walked through them absent-mindedly and fell into the wreckage of the elevator. I started to sweat nervously, so I punched the shut elevator doors and ran through the flames to get to the first floor. I walked out to get drenched in even more water, so I sighed, walked to grab my bag, and went towards the nearest bathroom. After a few minutes, I came out in my hero outfit. I saw Todoroki in his, still with the bracelet around his wrist. We shall meet up with 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗵𝗲 in half an hour. So for the time being, you two will be joining me on my patrol. We followed the crazy man into the dark of the night. I looked to the right. And there it was again, the skeleton. So I tapped Todoroki on the shoulder. He looked at me and didn't follow Mysterio going left. We have to find who is causing this, 'cause I don't think it has good intentions. I looked him in the eyes, while he looked at the creature. Yes, but we should get to it before it disappears. He pointed to it and it was running away. I looked at him again and nodded. The both of us started to sprint through the crowd of people to catch up to it. After a few minutes of running, we lost it. Hold on. I jumped into the sky and scanned the ground and any rooftops for the figure I saw earlier, or for the skeleton. I saw something but neither of those things. I touched the floor and started to run urgently towards that alleyway. I turned the corner to see a figure wielding a weapon over Iida-kun. I sprinted and threw myself into the blade's path. The knife was shoved down into my arm, and I barreled into the wall, next to a knocked-out hero. Damn it, I held my head and shook it. I saw the same figure in front of me. I flicked towards him, causing him to fly into the wall and create a small crater. Why are you here, Midoriya? This is my battle. I heard Iida shout at me. I took the blade out of my shoulder, and BLD sprayed out of it. Yeah, sure it was. Tell me, wouldn't you have been killed if I wasn't here, Iida? I know what you're going through, but that doesn't mean go get yourself killed. The figure pulled itself out of the wall and landed on the ground in front of me. He had on a torn white scarf and red clothing that covered his body. His eyes were red. Iida was speechless. He didn't know how to respond to the world of light I had brought him into. I presume you're the hero killer, Stain? Hee, that was powerful, kid. But yeah, you presumed right. He walked towards me, taking a katana out of its sheath. Thanks, but if you take one step closer, then I'll have to fight to protect these two. So I suggest. I looked down at the ground as he stopped advancing. The darkness of the alley covered my eyes in an eternal abyss of darkness. If you want to walk out of here in one piece, then leave. My eyes were crazy, and I smirked insanely. Careful now, those aren't words of a hero. I know, but you hurt my friend, so I have no compassion for you. He took one step closer to me. Fine by me. I went on the offensive and kicked him into the wall across from me. But there was a sharp stabbing pain in my ankle. He stabbed me as I made contact with him. The small blade was still in there, so I pulled it out and threw it into the wall next to him. I could see that it was buried down to the hilt. This is gonna be fun. What do you think, Iida? I asked as he ran towards me at a fast speed, completely ready to cut me with his long blade. I went behind him, and axe kicked him into the ground. He even spat up his own BLD. Gonna try something that should make the writing 100% better. If not, then 2%. You got a lot of nerve, Stain, sniped the hero in training. Trying to take the life of a man, he pointed to the hero that was against the wall, who was bleeding out slowly. Let alone two, for shame. He walked as close to the nose-less man clad in red as he could. Earning a grunt or two from one of his best male friends, Iida-tenya, he was currently trying to stand up, despite the temporary paralysis. So, the man had BLD trickling from his nose, a massive amount as well. Neither of them are heroic. He sprinted at the boy, with a blade in hand and ready to cut him up. They're both fake heroes. Unlike All Might, the only hero I'll let take me down. The man released his blade. It scraped the boy's skin as it seemingly stretched out to cut him. Blood dripped from the freshly cut wound as the boy launched a counterattack. He ran towards Stain and kicked the blade out of his hands, then grabbed his red torn scarf. Taking it in his hand, Izuku threw Stain halfway across the dark alley, enough to where he was cloaked in the darkness. But Izuku felt a warm liquid run down his hand, so he looked down. Damn it, he pulled the knife that was planted in the back of his hand. Izuku's blood started to gush violently from his hand and pool onto the ground. When can I not bleed out? He walked towards his friend, who was in quite a ridiculous hero costume. Why did you fight him for me? I'm the only one that could avenge my brother's legacy. Iida was, but he was currently blinded by the anger that was building up inside of him. Sure, 'cause it looks like you had it handled. With all the blood coming out of your side, I'm quite sure that you would have been able to fight him. Izuku always predicted what could happen in a battle, for he was a great strategist. Because if he never saw his friend fighting with Stain, Iida's head would surely be rolling around on the ground, and it was all because he thought he was invincible. He would have been easy for me to handle. Iida's thoughts trailed off, just like his eyes. They were looking at something going on behind Izuku. It was Stain, and he was on the ground, as if looking for something, but he just the blood off the ground. Izuku lost control over every muscle in his body, and fell to the ground like a broken doll. 𝗵𝗃. He threw a tiny dagger at the pro hero's neck. He was going to die from drowning in his own blood if he already wasn't. Now, it's a shame that I have to kill you, kid, but I ain't losing anytime soon. Stain was directly above Izuku, ready to bring his elongated sword down into his 𝗧𝗲𝗍, when fire roared above him, scorching Stain. What took you so long, Todoroki? He shouted from on the ground. Sorry, was getting rid of my demons. Where did you go, Midoriya? A lone white and red-haired boy shouted in the middle of the street. He wasn't sure at all where his friend had run off to, well, more like jumped. But something caught his eye, a figure in a purple and gold robe, the same as the skeleton that's been plaguing his vision every day, telling him to shut up or he'd be a puppet again. It was running through the crowd of people when Todoroki caught sight. Stop that man. He pointed at the skeleton as he chased after it, prepared to finally defeat what's been tormenting him and Midoriya. Men and women eyed him as if he were insane, but he wasn't bothered. He was always treated differently, ever since he gained his quirk. Ever since his father labeled him as the next #1 hero as a child, ever since then his memories were fragmented, as if he wasn't supposed to remember anything that went on between he and his dad. Where the hell did it go? Am I just seeing things? Todoroki thought, but was hit lightly on the back of his head, so he turned around to see the skeleton riding on his back. If you want to meet me, take a right into this alley, and climb up the fire escape. Personally, I don't give a SHT about what you do. The skeleton suddenly disappeared into thin air. He really wanted to put an end to this, but what if it was a trap? What if it wasn't? He didn't know. But he did what he was instructed. He went into the alley, and climbed up the fire escape. Hello. Todoroki called out as he walked onto the roof. He took a couple of steps before coming face to face with a man. 𝗧𝗍𝗪 stepped with his foot, sending a wave of ice towards the man, who seemingly floated away from it. Calm down. I only want to talk to you about your old man. The man also had a cloak on. His face was shadowed by the hood of it. Yeah. And what about him? Todoroki didn't lower his guard, so he encased the man in ice, rather easily actually. Now that I can't hurt you, will you listen? Todoroki contemplated for a moment, but eventually nodded. Alright, mind taking off my hood? 𝗧𝗍𝗪 felt oddly comfortable with the man, like he already knew him, so he walked up and flipped his hood. He had purple scars under his eyes and neck, black hair, and blue eyes like him. It's me. Toya Todoroki, your brother. We haven't seen you in years. What happened to you? 𝗧𝗍𝗪 wanted to hug him, but why was the skeleton leading him to here? Was Toya the commander of it? Dad happened. His black hair casted a shadow over his eyes. With how he treated you like a toy and treated Mom like he trailed off, and a small amount of water rolled down the ball of ice. I wanted to stay, but I had to find the man who did this to you 𝗧𝗱𝗧𝗟, and now I have. Blue flames erupted from his hands, reducing the ice and water to ash somehow. He aimed his hand towards the entrance to the main building. It melted down into ash, and a horrendous scream could be heard, as if someone was burning to death. He came around the corner, along with the skeleton, and collapsed to the ground, dying in an instant. Toya! What did you do? Todoroki held his head in pain as the faded memories flooded back into his mind. Let me give you a heads up, your friends are fighting Stain at the moment, and if you want to call me up, here's my number. See you again 𝗧𝗱𝗧𝗟, but we'll be enemies next time. A portal appeared and took the elder brother out of there, leaving the younger one to cry in pain, as his head throbbed. What the F in 𝗳𝗲𝗄, what is wrong with you? He doubled over, and his quirk activated, ice and fire poured out of his body, combining into an appealing symphony of elements. Why would he ever do this to me? Why? The pain died down, so he got up. On the ground in blue flame was an arrow and a phone number beneath it. If you need someone to talk to your older brother, known as Dabi the villain. 𝗧𝗱𝗧𝗟 looked in the direction of the flaming arrow, to see an armored leg popping out of the darkness. He quickly took a picture of the number, and used his quirk to make a slide of ice. He felt like he was a new man, one with an actual past that he could remember, despite it being absolute 𝗧𝗍𝗍 because of his father. He slid across the ice, melting and creating it as he moved closer to who he presumed to be Iida. He landed on the ground. What he saw was Izuku going to get stabbed in the 𝗧𝗍𝗍𝗍. Quickly, fire came out of his hand, and shot toward the perpetrator. Don't let him cut you, shouted Iida as 𝗧𝗱𝗧𝗟 walked towards the presumably burnt man. White. The man was back up, and already running to attack him. Another brat. Where do you keep coming from? A wall of ice appeared between the two, only an inch separated them. When he Izuku's BLD that was on the ground, he fell to the ground paralyzed. Just like me, Iida's finger twitched. Look, you may be right about what you said, Izuku. He moved his entire hand, and pushed himself up. But I'm not going to be helpless. He had entire control over his body, give or take a few twinges of static within, so he boosted himself through the ice wall, and out to the other side where he could kick Stain in the face. I won't give up. Not until I die. He rushed Stain again, and sent him flying into a wall. 𝗧𝗱𝗧𝗟 then covered him in ice. Good job you two. They both jumped in fright, for Izuku was somehow behind them. Especially you Iida, but we aren't done, look. He pointed up to Stain, who was already breaking free of his ice prison. How? The two shouted in retaliation as the man fell from the wall. I'll admit, you got me there. I'm going to lose, but I'm not going down without a fight. For it is my duty to rid the world of fake heroes. He coughed up. BLD as he said this, he ran towards the trio faster than he ever had before. Humans have natural limits to their bodies, meaning they can only do so much before they end up killing themselves with their actions, but somehow, someway, Stain is shattering his limits. He is faster than any human could without a strength quirk, leading one to believe that he isn't human. He bounced back and forth on the walls, making him almost invisible to the naked eye, when Iida suddenly cried out in pain and fell to the ground as well as 𝗧𝗱𝗧𝗟. Izuku looked to see one of Stain's daggers buried into his shoulder, and Todoroki had one planted in his calf. Stain rushed head-on at Izuku hoping he would be able to take the three down in an instant, but he noticed the boy closed his eyes. He slowed down but not quick enough, for Izuku had kneed him right in the stomach, sending him into a frenzy. I'm not going down like them. He tore off a scrap of his hero outfit, enough to create a makeshift BLNDFLD, and tied it around his eyes, effectively blinding him. 'Cause if you want to take me down, then you're gonna have to try harder. He took a fighter's stance, and was prepared for anything that would or could happen to them, for he was in control of all of their lives. Izuku couldn't see what was happening on the battlefield. He had covered his eyes with a BLNDFLD, as a sort of strategy. It was because of how fast Stain, the hero killer, was moving, which was at inhuman speeds, caused by how close he was to being defeated. 'Cause if you want to take me down, Izuku said after delivering his knee into Stain's stomach, then you're going to try harder than that. He raised his guard, ready to attack any projectiles, or a direct attack from his foe. Izuku, what in the goddamn hell are you doing? Todoroki shouted at him from the ground. He was paralyzed because of 𝗧𝗍𝗏. I'm saving you, that's what I'm doing. He dodged a projectile that was heading for his shoulder. This was all possible due to the super hearing that his quirk gave him. 𝗬𝗵𝗃 this kid, he's too powerful, thought 𝗧𝗍𝗏 as he rushed towards Iida, who was also on the ground. Izuku could hear the wind tear and 𝗬𝗏𝗶 around 𝗧𝗍𝗏, and could tell that he was running towards his friends. He swiftly stepped in front of 𝗧𝗍𝗏 and flicked his forefinger at him, sending him flying down the alleyway. Then at least open your eyes, shouted Iida at him. Can't, unless you want to die. 𝗧𝗍𝗏 was already near Izuku when he finished that sentence. Izuku jumped to where he guessed 𝗧𝗏𝗏 was successful. He punched 𝗧𝗍𝗏 right in his messed up face, but what he wasn't anticipating was the knife that was now in his arm. He landed next to his friends and pulled the knife out of his arm. 𝗧𝗏𝗏, can you guys keep this safe? Thanks. Izuku threw the knife in the wall that was directly to his side. Tiny knives were thrown at him, so he just punched them back to 𝗧𝗍𝗏, without touching them of course. Izuku shouted. A sword, which he had no clue about, was thrown at the same time as the knives, but higher so he wouldn't know where it was. It was stuck in his right bicep. He took off his 𝗵𝗃𝗏𝗺, cause he was in too much pain to hear anything he threw. Izuku braced for the pain that was going to come when he pulled the sword out. He held the sword in front of him with his left hand, and was prepared to kill the butt with it. 𝗧𝗍𝗏 was standing in front of him, laughing. Why, you piece of FSHT. I'm going to end you. Izuku's hair stood up as if electricity was in the air. The alleyway also lit up for some reason, but Izuku didn't care. He ran head-on for 𝗧𝗍𝗏, but he was faster than ever before, so he was in his face in an instant. He flipped the sword in the air and caught it by the blade. He gripped it tight and slammed it down onto 𝗧𝗍𝗏's head, instantly knocking him out and making him bleed. He let out a sigh as he picked 𝗧𝗍𝗏 up by his arm. Izuku then walked back to his friends at the entrance of the alley. I did it, guys, I beat the hero killer. He cheered, but something was wrong. His friends were speechless. What's wrong? He asked as he went to pick up Iida from the ground. Even though 𝗧𝗍𝗏's quirk was disabled, neither of them moved. 𝗵𝗃𝗏𝗏. What do you mean? Iida said, you were electric? Thank you, Iida. I meant literally. You still kind are. Izuku was confused by this. He had electricity flowing through him. He looked at his right arm and saw faint streaks of black thunder running through it. What the hell? He said quietly, whatever, just get up. We gotta save this hero and turn 𝗧𝗍𝗏 in. Neither of them moved again, possibly due to fright. Get the hell up. He shouted at them, so they did and went to the pro hero that was against the wall, but he was most likely dead or close to it because of the pool of BLD that was dangerously large beneath him. They picked him up and brought him out of the alleyway, and there he stood, 𝗫𝗏𝗏. Where the hell did you two go off to? He was, and behind him were 3 other sidekicks, who looked they were on the verge of death. But so did Todoroki, cause his fist was bleeding due to how strong he was holding it. Sorry, Mr. 𝗫𝗏𝗏, my friends were saving me from being killed by the hero killer. Iida said as he bowed to 𝗫𝗏𝗏. Hey Iida, Izuku whispered to him. You don't have to apologize to him. As Izuku finished saying that, he felt the freezing cold of Todoroki's ice. Hey 𝗫𝗏𝗏𝗏. Todoroki got the attention of his father. What did you just call me, you insolent brat? His flames were bigger than ever, causing the ground to melt. I called you 𝗫𝗏𝗏𝗏. Todoroki had a spear of blue and black fire pointed at his father's throat, ready to kill him. Now what the F did you do to me as a child? Careful where you point that thing, child. One small slip, and you might just die, he said in response, and then grabbed the spear. He pulled his hand back in retaliation. It was even hotter than his own flame. How was this possible? Was Todoroki actually the tool to bring down All Might? Damn it. Mysterio. He waited a few moments for Todoroki to lower the spear, but it never came. What did you fool do? He shouted at Todoroki. Izuku and Iida were just standing to the side with 𝗧𝗍𝗏 held by the American-esque hero, completely confused as to what was going on between the two. I didn't do a thing, he was reduced to ash by an old friend, Todoroki said smugly. Enji's face turned to that of surprise. Your brother killed him? Yeah, now I should kill you here, but I want to know why you did what you did to me. His father stayed quiet. Why did you do it? His father was quiet again. Why are you working with the League of Villains? Izuku tensed up, and the electricity came back. Zenji also had a look of disappointment on his face. I'm sorry that I can't answer you, questioned 𝗧𝗪. There was a small rope of flames around his ankle, so Zenji pulled on it, making his son fall. A portal opened up behind Zenji, so he ran towards it and jumped into it. Everything seemed to happen at once. 𝗧𝗪 was awake and had stabbed Izuku in the shoulder, then his BLD paralyzing him and holding him hostage. 𝗳𝗍𝗪𝗏 was now a villain to everyone currently present, but not by the public. And finally Izuku was releasing too much power, causing his arm wound to bleed even faster. Drop the kid, 𝗧𝗪, shouted one of the sidekicks to the villain Endeavor. He held out his arm that had a gauntlet on it. Iida and Todoroki were too stunned to help him, but they were prepared to save him. I won't let you take me down. Only All Might can. He's the only true hero in this world. All the other heroes are fake. All they want is money, fame, and followers. They're all greedy, and I'll be the one to end them all. He pulled out a hidden blade from his scarf and plunged it into Izuku's UFO. Izuku yelled at him, but the world had other plans. A 𝗨𝗵𝗃 was flying towards the two. The flying white 𝗨𝗵𝗃 released a sound that caused everyone to hold their ears, except Izuku because he was paralyzed. The 𝗨𝗵𝗃 sunk its talons into Izuku's shoulder and flew away with him. 𝗧𝗪 and Iida were ready to get him back. Todoroki created a ramp of ice that led up to Izuku, and Iida used his quirk to get to him. Reciprocal burst, ultra. Iida's engines overclocked themselves and let out small white flames, and Iida was sent flying. But there was another contestant to save Izuku, 𝗧𝗪, the hero killer. He had a blade in his hand and was ready to cut the 𝗨𝗵𝗃. There was also another contender, Izuku himself. The black electricity consumed Izuku's body. It then disappeared, and then came back in an implosion. Izuku, the 𝗨𝗵𝗃, and 𝗧𝗪 were caught in the electrical blast. Iida was safe because his quirk backfired when one of his engines blew out, but as Izuku fell, no one made a move to save him. Only Todoroki. He made a pillar of ice below him, causing him to only fall a small bit. He was also unconscious. As well as 𝗧𝗪, if he wasn't killed by the blast, unlike the 𝗨𝗵𝗃. Izuku! His friends shouted, call an ambulance. Iida yelled at one of the sidekicks as he picked up Izuku's limp body. 𝗧𝗪 took notice of the wound on his bicep and lit a small blue flame on the tip of his finger. He made a clamp of ice and took the two sides of the wound and closed them together. Then he applied the flame to it, closing it in an instant. The ambulances finally arrived, and the critically injured Izuku, 𝗧𝗪, and the DOA Pro Hero native were placed within them. DOA is dead on arrival for those of you who didn't know. Iida and Todoroki were left where it happened, with the sidekicks. Iida was visibly shaken, so 𝗧𝗪 went up to him and placed a hand on his shoulder. Are you alright, Iida? He asked as he took a seat next to him. I caused this all to happen. If I didn't try to redeem my brother, then maybe none of this would happen. Iida, you know that Izuku did this because he couldn't see you hurt. He sacrificed himself for the both of us. And who knows, he could be better soon. He always has bounced back from things like this. Iida looked off into the distance. I know. But nothing. Let's just go, 𝗧𝗪-san. Iida stood up and held his arm out towards him. 𝗧𝗪 took it and was pulled back up. So your dad is actually a villain. How do you know that? Iida asked as they walked away. My brother who disappeared told me. Odd, right? With what's going on, not really. The two laughed and started to walk towards the nearest hospital, where Izuku would be held. He has just had the worst of luck. He was almost killed by 𝗧𝗪, who had his mind taken over. He almost was killed by his father, but ended up killing him, and he defeated 𝗧𝗪 and knocked himself out with mysterious electricity. But why electricity? Thought Iida. Iida and 𝗧𝗪 arrived at the hospital, yet the former still felt guilty about causing his friend Izuku Midoriya to get injured. 𝗧𝗪 approached the front desk. May I help you? The female receptionist said to him. Yeah, do you know which room Izuku Midoriya would be? She pointed down the hall. It should be room 0205, and it's gonna be on your right. She was polite, and he felt like he had met her before, but couldn't place his finger on it. Thank you, have a good rest of your night. Come on, Iida. The friends walked down the hallway and eventually made their way to Izuku's room. A doctor came out of the room. "Are you Izuku Midoriya's friends?" he asked. Iida nodded. "You can go in, but try not to disturb him since he's still knocked out." He then walked into another room that was down the hall. They didn't care, so they walked into Izuku's room. "He's been in hospitals a lot lately, hasn't he?" Tadu asked. "Yes, he has." They turned the corner and saw him laying asleep in the bed. He had a lot of machinery hooked up to him, which made sweat bead on Iida's forehead. "I thought he was just knocked out." 𝗧𝗪 went up to him and lifted the covers off of his body. His shirt was torn and his wounds were patched up. But there was something else. An odd burn mark was positioned on the back of both of his hands and were laced down to his shoulder. It kinda looked like lightning. "What's this?" 𝗧𝗪 reached in to touch the mark. "Todoroki." Iida rushed to stop him, but was too late. His friend was grabbed. Izuku's eyes were wide open and looking at Todoroki being choked. "Izuku, stop choking him." Iida grabbed his friend's hand and pulled it away. Izuku started to calm down, so he sat up in his bed. He looked to his arm and tore the ◕ out of it. He also took out the tube in his throat. What the hell was that for? He was holding his throat as he coughed. "I didn't cow who you were. I just thought you were a villain because you electrocuted me." He looked down at his arms and saw the marks. "What the hell are these? What did you guys do?" he asked. One of his arms reached for the other's marks and he shocked himself. The pain sang throughout his arm and eventually spread to the rest of his body rather quickly. The marks then disappeared and a small amount of electricity surged from his hands. He felt stronger for some unknown reason. "What do you mean us?" "Those probably appeared after you were taken by the Nomu creature," Iida explained. "Whatever. They're gone." Izuku swung his body over the bed's edge and stood up in one swift move. "Todoroki, would you kindly leave?" His face was a mix of determination and anger, which were usually unrelated emotions. He wanted to protest the other's orders, but he knew it would be the right thing to not do, so he swiftly left the room. "Iida." Izuku walked and stopped in front of him. "You are the biggest dumbass I've ever met." He slapped his friend. "You should know what you did wrong. You would have died." Iida stared idly into his eyes. It was quite intimidating since Izuku was taller than him. "I know, and I can't help but feel horrible for putting you two through that." "Iida, you don't seem to understand. I don't care that I had to save you." Tenya was confused as he looked at his friend. "I care that you thought your life didn't matter. Sure, a hero should risk their lives for others, but they still shouldn't forget the value of their own life, because if they were gone, then the people that cared for them would be sad. If you died, Iida, you would be leaving behind so many people that love and cherish you, so please don't do that again." Izuku wasn't one for tears ever since he got his quirk at least, but this was a rare moment where tears were in his eyes. Tenya had tears coming out of his eyes. Seemingly moved by his friend's words, he simply nodded. "Good," was all Izuku said before he called 𝗧𝗪 back in here, but he wasn't alone. His mother had walked through the door with all might. Inko was the first to reach him, mainly because she ran inside as soon as the door opened. "Izuku, honey, are you all right?" His mother was in front of his face as she continued to barrage him with questions. "Mom, I'm fine, otherwise I'd still be in bed." His head started to spin. "Oh, thank God," she exclaimed, "but you have to stop hurting yourself. It's not healthy." She then hugged him. "I know, but Mom, could you do me a favor?" The heart rate monitor that he was still attached to had started to slow. "What is it?" Izuku couldn't see anything. His vision was too blurry. "Could you stop hugging me?" He didn't ask rudely, he just didn't want his friends to see him embarrassed for too long, and she let him out. But as soon as she did, he fell to the ground, knocked out yet again. Momo was out on patrol with the Dragoon hero, when her mentor suddenly stopped. "What is it?" she asked. "Villain 2 o'clock in that alleyway." Since they were on the rooftops, it was easier for them to do their jobs. They moved over to the top and peered down onto the people. It was Shigaraki. "Let's go get them," said Ryukyu. "No, we shouldn't. They're from the League of Villains and they seem to be talking about something." She quickly created something to help her hear the conversation and put it against her ear. Too bad she wasn't Jairu, otherwise it'd be so much easier. "That was a huge failure," Shigaraki said to Kurojirai. Momo didn't know that he was even there due to the darkness. "I still can't believe Endeavor revealed he was working with us." "Whatever, at least one of our Nomas took out that dreaded brat. Let's just get back home." A portal opened up in front of him and they both moved into it. disappearing to who knows where. That dreaded brat. Who could that mean? What if he meant Izuku? Endeavor's a goddamn villain. I always knew he was. Ryukyu wasn't really surprised at that, mainly because he always struck a bad chord with her whenever they were around each other. But Momo didn't care. She just pulled out her phone and called her boyfriend. Ring. Fear ran through her BLD. Ring. Could her intuition be right? Ring, ring, ring. No answer. What if he was just ignoring her though? No, he wouldn't do that. Ring. Hello. It wasn't Izuku, but it was Iida for some reason. Iida, thank God you picked up. But where's Izuku? Iida hesitated for a moment and she could hear muffled speaking from him. Hi, this is Todoroki. Your boyfriend is currently knocked out in the hospital. What do you mean I shouldn't tell her that? Then why did you give me the phone? Momo hung up. Her heart was heavy and her mind was clouded. How did they even get him? Was the only question on her mind. Momo. Why yes ma'am. Pay attention, our patrol continues. Now come on. Inko fainted as soon as her son fainted. Her soul literally left her body and Small might put it back inside. He moved her into a chair. Why is he so heavy? Asked Todoroki, grunting as he moved Izuku into his bed along with Iida. He could feel Izuku's body temperature, which was way too high for any normal human. An idea popped into his head. He tore the remaining scraps of clothing that were covering the upper parts of his body. The wound that he sealed up looked infected. Quickly, he hit the button that called the staff into here. A red light appeared on the machine next to his bed and a nurse came in quickly. Is something or how did he get out of his bed? That doesn't matter, but where he took some damage from an enemy is something that looks infected. He also has a raised fever. Shudo commented. Both Small Might and Iida were trying to wake up Miss Midoriya. The nurse looked at his shoulder and touched the wound with a gloved hand. The film protecting her hand burned up when she touched the wound. Was the Nomu's claws poisonous? Izuku's fever easily broke over 100 degrees when Shudo decided to call Momo again. She had said meekly into the receiver of the phone. Not to worry you, but I think you should come to the Kimono General Hospital, because Izuku's in trouble and I think your quirk can save him. He's what she yelled into the phone. If it was possible she would have reached through and wrung his neck. He's sick and you can save him. Just get down here please. He sounded desperate and he didn't know why. Maybe it was because he felt a small pang of guilt for what happened. Maybe it was the thought of losing someone that he genuinely liked to be around. Maybe it was both. Izuku's heart rate was increasing slowly, but steadily. It was beating too fast for a human to live under those conditions, yet he somehow managed. Iida tapped Shudo's shoulder, which easily got his attention. Todoroki, wasn't that where he was picked up by the flying Nomu? His voice was hushed, because he didn't want to worry the remaining Midoriya in the room, which was the skeletal blonde-haired man. Now that you mention it, he paused for a single moment. You know it wasn't that obvious? He quickly let out in a sarcastic way. Geez, you're rude. Anyways, if the Nomu had a quirk that made his skin or talons poisonous, wouldn't there be a cure to it? A light bulb appeared over Shudo's head, everything seemed to fall into place, and the glass containing his reality was shattered. You aren't wrong, but didn't Izuku destroy it with that electricity burst? Wasn't it fried from the inside out? Maybe the talons were left intact, but talons shouldn't be destroyed, at least according to the laws of the universe. Shudo chuckled lightly. You never cease to be stuck up. You should be right though, Iida deadpanned when the other chuckled. This is not the time to have fun, our friend is dying. He was walking towards the door. The scene shouldn't be completely cleaned up yet. So I'll go and get that talon. Thus started Iida's epic journey. It was a quest to save his friend whose condition is getting worse. Was there another reason? Yes, and it was to redeem himself in the eyes of his friend, because he also felt like he caused this. As soon as Iida exited the building, he heard the distant roar of what sounded like a dragon. He paid no attention for it wasn't important to the task at hand. His engines started to radiate a heat. It seems as if they were still overclocked from his special move earlier. Or maybe they were just destroyed forever. Still, he didn't care, not about himself at least. Iida ran as fast as he could without the use of his engines. He may not have looked it, but he was rather fast without his quirk. He ran and ran and ran, until he finally was there despite being out of breath. He cursed himself. for the body of the 𝗵𝗃 and every hero there was gone, and for some reason a mysterious hearse was moving in the opposite direction of him. Suddenly he could feel his engines again, and for the first time that night, he smiled. They started to vibrate and power up again. "I'm going to save you, Izuku." He started to run across the road with the help of his engines. His body was telling him to quit before everything shut down, but he was a hero and he needs to protect those that can't protect themselves. The hearse took a sharp left and Iida followed. He was rather close to catching up to the vehicle. But he noticed that it was gradually getting faster, and Iida gradually went faster. He was truly willing to lay his life down for a friend, just like he was going to do for his brother's honor, though he wasn't thinking straight when he tried. Finally, he had a hand on the hearse's back door, the door that was used to load the deceased into. Something unexpected happened though. It opened soon after he laid his hand on it, revealing a man that was slightly older than him with black scruffy hair and a t-shirt and mask with a skull on them. "Naruto, gun this kid down," shouted someone from the driver's seat. "Sure," shouted the boy that Iida had come to know as Naruto, but he didn't pay attention to that. All he saw were the dead bodies of the heroes that were there with them. They had multiple small gun holes burrowed into their bodies, and there was also the 𝗵𝗃, who was shriveled up and dead. A small bullet nicked Iida's ear and BLD started to drip slowly from it. He diverted his attention back to the boy who had his fingers pointed towards him. He could see that there were small spike-like bullets coming from under the fingernails. Quickly Iida slowed down and dodged the projectiles that were heading straight for him. They were small and extremely strong to see. But somehow, he made it back to the boy named Naruto before he got hit. It was kind of pathetic how bad this villain's aim was, but Iida gave him the benefit of the doubt since he was riding in the back of a moving vehicle. He jumped into the hearse and was immediately tackled by Naruto. "OW, help me with him," he said in pain. Iida was currently winning between the two of them, but that was mainly because he had Naruto pinned underneath him, and that was due to him playing dirty and kneeing him in the ball. The driver slammed the brakes of the vehicle down as strong as they could, which threw both Iida and Naruto out of the back. They were both dazed when they stopped tumbling across asphalt and concrete. Both of the injured stood up and looked at each other. But Iida could hardly make out the blurry enemy, because when he fell, his glasses fell off with him. He began to run circles around his foe, so that he couldn't get a single shot in as he reached into his pocket for something. Surprisingly, it worked and he pulled out a pair of glasses that were undamaged and looked like the other pair. So, he put them on, and could see a lady in the back of the hearse trying to pull out one of the 𝗵𝗃's talons as he continued to run. She did it rather easily, but noticed that it was smaller. He needed that talon. It didn't matter if he was injured by it. Just as long as he got it, then everything would be fine. Izuku would also be fine. So, Iida stopped dead in his tracks and rocketed a kick towards Naruto's gut. Sachi has never felt pain this intense in a while as he collided with a wall. His imprint was left in the wall as he fell down. Iida truly worried if he killed the man, but saw him try to get back up before he fell to the ground, presumably knocked out. "Excuse me, miss, but I'm going to need that weapon in your hand and I'm not taking no for an answer." He was still exhausted from how much he's been using his quirk. But he needed to prevail and save Izuku before it was too late. The woman hopped out of the back of the vehicle, and the 𝗵𝗃 seemed like it disappeared. Where did it go? Iida questioned loudly in his mind as he took a defensive stance. "Sorry," she looked at Iida with blood-red, piercing eyes. It sent a chill down his spine. "But you hurt my Naruto, and I can't really forgive you." Her voice was low and her voice menacing. She went on the attack and tried to slash Iida with the talon, but he stepped backwards and tripped, but narrowly missed it. As he fell to the ground, he could see the fine pointed tip of the talon. But of course, he's not that lucky. There was a sharp and stabbing pain in his side. It was a small blade. The blade wasn't large enough to put a cut into his skin, but when it grew it did. It didn't become that large, though it was large enough to make Iida bleed a light amount of BLD. With one arm he took the blade, and with the other he touched the ground. Using his engines he was pushed off the ground. He landed a kick on her chin and was able to stand up by pushing off the ground with his arm. As Iida stood he plucked the blade out of his abdomen and tossed it towards the incapacitated villain. The woman he was fighting had dropped the talon and was laying on the ground with her face towards the night sky. So Ida seized the means of production and ran past her, grabbing the 𝗧𝗨𝗧𝗟 as he did. I'm sorry that it has to be this way. He saw everything around him start to get bigger. But I gotta get back to my friend. Ida's engines activated, but they seemed to be slower than a moment before, and that's when she started to laugh. Huh, you look so stupid when you're that short? Ida was confused. Wasn't he taller than her? But when she stood straight, he could notice that he was even shorter than her, and that hole where Naruto had laid in for a few seconds was bigger than his entire body. He glanced at his arms, the clothing still fit, but why was he 𝗧𝗵𝗲 quirk? Everything that blade touches must shrink. Is there a way to reverse it? He was dodging huge bullets with his quirk as he ran for cover in an alley. Get back here, you small idiot. She was carrying Naruto with her and using his quirk. Maybe she had another quirk that could force another to use theirs. But Ida has never heard of something like that, not even a drag. So what was it that caused a knocked-out man to use his quirk unconsciously? He looked over his shoulder to see another sword in the user's forehead. That makes sense. Ida shouted as he dodged 3 bullets that all landed right next to him. I wonder, will this work? He jumped off the ground and shot himself into the air with the power of his engine's exhaust fume blasts. A bullet was shot at him in the air, so he dodged upwards. But that wasn't what he was trying to do. He turned around midair. Air shot from the pipes of his engine, and Ida was on top of the bullet, which was being shot into the alley. Ida jumped off the bullet right before it collided with the wall. He then ran into the shadows, as to not be seen for his next attack. God damn it! The woman shouted. He got away, at least I still have the 𝗧𝗨𝗧𝗟𝗘. That's right, Ida had forgotten entirely about it because he was running for his life. There has to be a range or time limit to her quirk, or it'd be too powerful. But when will it end? Suddenly a gunshot sounded out, and Ida went back to normal. He saw everything that happened. A figure on a nearby roof had shot the woman in the neck with a bullet, effectively killing her in an instant. Which disabled her quirk's hold on him and the 𝗨𝗨𝗧𝗟𝗍. Ida went silent when the figure jumped down from the roof. He could tell just by the weight that was suddenly pushed down on his shoulders that this person was ruthless and would kill anyone in a second's notice. You guys are useless. He pulled a pistol and shot Naruto in the head. Ida may have not known either of these people, but he instantly felt bad for them. Nothing about that man exuded an aura of humanity. Knocked out by a kid, outsmarted by the same. I don't even know why I hired you, if I could get the job easily. He grabbed the 𝗧𝗨𝗧𝗟𝗘 from the woman's grasp and walked towards the hearse. He was planning to destroy it, and Ida had to stop him if he wanted the cure. Here goes nothing, Ida thought as he stood up. His engines let off the same sound as they did earlier. The man his head and armed hand towards it. Ida could make out how scruffy his face was. But he also had some robotics covering the left side of his face, as if he was a cyborg. Ida ran before the man could pull the trigger, and this time blue and white fire came out of his exhaust pipes. Checkmate, Ida said as he zoomed towards the man. He was knocked down as Ida ran back down the road faster than he ever could. Ida was exhausted, but every fiber of his being told him to keep going and to get out, or it would be the end of him. Should have killed him when I had the chance. The man looked to his empty hand while laying motionless on the ground. Great. My day just keeps getting better and better. His voice was low and gravelly, which could be why Ida was petrified when he first appeared. Ida tackled the alleyway's ground. He couldn't feel any muscles in his legs. He had overused his engines and his muscles, though it was surprising to how far he traveled before collapsing. Ida looked at his surroundings as he took deep breaths. Everything was clear, and he actually had the 𝗧𝗨𝗧𝗟𝗑 with him. Everything looked clear, so he started to speak. Who was that? His voice shook because he was terrified at what that man was. If it was even a man, he reached into his pocket for his phone, but found that it wasn't there. I guess Izuku'll have to wait for me to recover. He slammed his fist onto the ground. Is this truly the best I could do? A menacing voice rang throughout the small alleyway. Of course you did, Ida. He got goosebumps, not because it was the same voice as a few moments ago, but because it was a voice of pure anger and rage. Who are you? He yelled back at the voice. Footsteps bounced off the right walls of the corridor. You should know who I am, Ida. The person walked out of the shadows and placed their hands onto his shoulders. It was Momo. "Come on, let's get you up," she said as she positioned him against the wall. "Thank you, 𝗧𝗵𝗲. I didn't know what would happen to me without you." His grip on the 𝗧𝗨𝗧𝗟𝗘 tightened. And Iida did the most unexpected thing ever, he held it up to her throat. "But you aren't her, are you?" "Iida, what are you saying? Of course I'm Momo." "You really aren't, because if I remember she was on her way here with the dragoon hero or she was traveling on foot. So there's no way you can be her, am I right?" Momo's irises turned yellow, and she began to melt. It was a wounded person, the same person that impersonated 𝗧𝗵𝗃𝗁𝗃. "You really don't play around, do you, Iida? But I hope you know I can walk, while you—" She tapped him on the nose, making him flinch while she stepped back. "Cannot. Am I right?" she asked as if she was mocking him. Iida scowled. "If you try anything, I will cut you with this." And guess what? His face turned into a scornful scowl. "You'll die. And I don't think you want that happening to you." Iida has only brought out the ruthless side to himself only when he feels cornered. And for the first time in his life he found out that he actually can be ruthless, enough to cause a hardcore villain to start sweating. "You're so hot when you speak like that." She had a look of pure joy on her face. Was she really turned on by what Iida said? He was too confused to continue being like that robotic man from earlier. But what happened next was even more confusing. She leaned in and him on the lips. Iida hated the few moments that their lips were touching, so much so that he began to actually form a hatred for her. When Toga broke the embrace, she noticed that Iida had a small blush on his face. "I think I'll let you leave here with the 𝗧𝗨𝗧𝗟𝗘. It's not like it's going to do much for us." She got up and walked back towards the darkness. "Also, don't think that I let you have it because I like you." She looked back at him with a crazy red face. "I only love Izuku, so don't let him die. Goodbye, Iida." And with that, her footsteps bounced off the walls as she ran away. He was still shocked, and it was all because she stole his first embrace. He wanted to share it with someone he truly loved, someone that he's had his eye on for a while. Izuku-chan. A girl that he was always excited to see, someone who always made him happy, and someone he could envision growing old with. Was he hopelessly in love with her? Maybe, but he'd have to see if that's true. Trying to push the thought of her out of his mind, Iida put his hand on the wall behind him. He propped himself up with the power of his upper body, and stood. Or tried to. His legs wobbled quicker with each passing second. He most likely tore a muscle, which was what his hero costume tried to do, but he wasn't wearing that since he had to change after being saved by Izuku. Despite the pain rising from his legs into the rest of his body, Iida started to walk out of the alleyway and towards where his friend lay, incapacitated. In the span of what was an hour, Iida had felt he had redeemed himself. He defeated a villain, got the 𝗧𝗨𝗧𝗟𝗘, and witnessed a dangerous villain who didn't seem to be an underground one, for he didn't think that he really ever showed himself. But he did, to Iida of all people, a person competent enough to come out alive from that accidental meeting. And as he walked into the distance, he truly reflected on how he could be a better hero than he currently was. Meanwhile, a nurse was monitoring Izuku, while Todoroki consoled Momo and the people who were most likely Izuku's parents. When Iida walked through the door, Shudo shot up from his seat and walked to welcome his friend. "Iida, did you get it?" he asked. Iida was worse for wear, but still held up the 𝗧𝗨𝗧𝗟𝗘 triumphantly. Shudo snatched it from his hand and popped around the corner to toss it at Momo. "Here, catch." With that, he threw the Nomu's 𝗧𝗨𝗧𝗟𝗘 at Momo. She could probably make a cure if she had a proper sample of its venom. Shudo diverted his attention back to Iida. He was just in time. Because Iida was about to fall on the ground, he caught him. "Don't quit on me now, only a few more steps then you can stop." Shudo helped his friend move towards the only empty chair in the room. He wouldn't have said helped, more like dragged, since Iida was beyond exhausted. Because when he sat on the chair he actually passed out. "Todoroki, what do you want me to do with this?" Momo asked as she got his attention by clacking it against the wall next to her. "I don't know, create an anti-venom. Can't your quirk do that?" "We can," the nurse, who was unnoticed by anyone in the room, spoke up. She was in there the entire time, but no one really cared since they all watched Izuku so he wouldn't die. "Oh yeah, I kinda forgot about that," Shudo said nervously as he scratched the side of his face. Month later, after Izuku was poisoned by the 𝗏𝗏 and promptly healed because of his best friend's actions. He along with Todoroki were prohibited from continuing their internship due to 𝗲𝗏𝗏 disappearing. So during the time that they had off, they were forced by Nizu to help him around the school. Which wasn't so bad, except the times when they had to fight a teacher at the end of each day. It was rather easy when they partnered up, and the only difficulty they had was against Aizawa, who had rid the two of their quirks, making the fight too trivial for the pro to win. Afterwards they were scolded for letting their guards down against him because he was going to be easy like the others. Which is what Izuku said to his friend beforehand. Otherwise nothing really happened during the next month, until their final exams were revealed to them a few weeks prior. Alright, you guys will be having your final exams take place 2 weeks from today. There will be the written version as well as a practical version where you'll have to go up against a random teacher. The bell rang signaling the coming of first PRD, which meant it was Aizawa's time to leave the classroom. Good luck and try to be prepared. He left everyone in the room shockingly quiet, which was a first. Never had any of his students been this silent. Apparently they were surprised that he had so nonchalantly brought up something really important. Present Mike had walked into the room. "Yo, how is everyone doing today?" he asked, to which no one answered. They acted as if he wasn't there. What did he just say? "We have to defeat a teacher in order to pass our finals." Oh God, I really don't want to lose to him again, both Izuku and Todoroki thought at the same time. Sweat beaded down Izuku's face for the rest of the day, completely frightened by the passage of time, because he really didn't want the finals to come at least without preparing. The final bell of the day rang out and Momo came up to his desk. "Izuku, do you want to study after school today?" After discovering the plot between her father and the League of Villains, her father, Atlas, decided to go into hiding. Presumably with the League, supplying them with money if anything. "I'd love to, but I can't. I've got to do my own studying alone, though I think it can wait for a day." He knew how strong her life had gotten without her father. She had to deal with her mother, who had resorted to being a shut-in after Atlas left. She was the one who took it the hardest, because Athena had loved the man for who he was, and now that she no longer knew who he truly was, she became depressed. Momo felt horrible about the whole ordeal, but had somebody that she loved to endure it with. He stood up and picked up his bag next to his seat. The couple then side by side to Izuku's house. Momo had decided upon it because it would have been easier to study there. It was also much closer than hers. But as they walked, Izuku couldn't help but feel eyes bear themselves into the back of his head. He looked up to where he thought they were, but saw nothing, just the vast blue sky. Was there really something watching them? It's probably just my imagination, nothing to worry about. He only felt this way because of how many times he's fought with villains, especially in a short time PRD. After bringing Momo back to her home and starting his journey back to his home at night, he had felt like he was being watched again, but it was more intense. He began to walk the road that was to his house, when he heard footsteps resounding in the moonlight. He turned on his heel and saw a normal-looking salaryman walking behind him, who presumably just got off of his work. "Tragedy will strike you soon," a voice whispered in his ear from right behind him. A shiver went down Izuku's spine as he turned around, delivering a punch to the man that was behind him, only to completely miss and only hit the air because he was gone as soon as he arrived. He quickly scanned his surroundings, looking for any traces of a living person, when his eyes landed on a cloaked figure upon a roof. They stared at each other, until the man waved goodbye and promptly disappeared into thin air. "What the hell? Who was that?" he said quietly. He was still scared because he was still trembling despite the air being warm. He tried to take a step, but found himself to hardly move. He was too petrified and couldn't move. Just what made that man so scary, despite not even seeing his power or even face. After the next day came and passed, Izuku went to his training spot in the woods, still offset by the event that happened the previous night. He trained his body and constantly pushed it beyond its limits, though he nearly broke himself every time he did it for too long. But despite this, his limit started to increase from a minute to 2, and even to 3, and this was within the whole week and a half before the finals. His last 3 days were spent studying for the written portion of the exam. The night prior to his written exams, he fell asleep early, but couldn't help staying awake, especially when he heard a faint tap at his window. He got up and walked over to his window in nothing but boxers, only to see the glass was splintered and started to break, and it was all from a faint tap. How was this possible? In fact, how did someone get up to his room? There was no fire escape that was in front of his window. In fact, there wasn't even a fire escape in his building. Which is partially why they live here, since it's rather cheap for something so nice. He laid back down in his bed and had a strong time drifting off to sleep, and when he finally did, he found himself within a dreamless void. One filled completely with black as far as the eye could see, or was it? He had begun to see the shadows move from the corner of his eyes. What was that? He looked directly at it, but it wasn't moving. The only thing that was the thing behind him. Just one more day, Izuku. Just 𝗬𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗟𝗘. Izuku felt an iron grip grasp tightly onto his shoulder, crushing it in its frozen embrace. 𝗬𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗍𝗪𝗪𝗍𝗪𝗍𝗪𝗪𝗍𝗪𝗍𝗪𝗍𝗪𝗍𝗪𝗍𝗪𝗍𝗪𝗍𝗪𝗍𝗪𝗍𝗪𝗍𝗪𝗍𝗪𝗍𝗪𝗍𝗪𝗍𝗪𝗍𝗪𝗍𝗪𝗍𝗪𝗍𝗪𝗍𝗪𝗍𝗪𝗍𝗪𝗍𝗪𝗍𝗪𝗍𝗪𝗍𝗪𝗍𝗪𝗍𝗪𝗍𝗪𝗍𝗪𝗍𝗪𝗍𝗪𝗍𝗪𝗍𝗪𝗍𝗪𝗍𝗪𝗍𝗪𝗍𝗪𝗍𝗪𝗍𝗪𝗍𝗪𝗍𝗪𝗍 this? What was he going to do tomorrow? What will happen to Izuku? None of his questions were answered. Instead, he woke up in a cold sweat. It poured off of his bare, muscle-bound body, pooling in his bedsheets, nearly soaking them entirely with the cold liquid on his body. He sighed and wiped his forehead. Not again. These nightmares have been happening consistently since he met the figure, and every night those same questions popped into his mind. They were never answered, and the dream or nightmare, or whatever the hell you want to call it, always happened like that. His window would be broken, he'd fall asleep, and then get tormented by the demon of a man that he met. It was no doubt that if he didn't solve this soon, then he'd start to go insane. He arrived at school rather late that morning. It seemed like nearly everyone awaited his arrival because all the seats were filled, besides his and Aizawa's. He was typically late, but that was due to how tired he always was. He took a seat, and shortly after Aizawa entered the room, he was particularly more awake than other days, which was odd for him. Today is the start of your practical exams. In a moment I'll put up a screen that will show who you are partnered with and who you will be going against. I wish you all the best of luck in your battles, he said as the screen appeared. Izuku looked for his name. There it is. I'm going against All Might with Kaken. He looked at his old best friend, only to see him equally surprised. Why were they placed together? Did the teachers just hate them? Or were they trying to help fix weaknesses? The latter started to make sense, because Izuku saw that Tsu and Tokoyami were against ectoplasm, which would be a bad matchup for Toko, but a really good one for Tsu. Then there were teams like Sato and Kirishima, who had a pretty bad matchup against 𝗬𝗵𝗃. How will they overcome their challenge, if they do, I mean? He looked at whom Momo was against. It was Eraserhead, and she was Shoto, whom he could now trust, though he had a bad reaction to it. The screen turned off, and Aizawa began giving instructions for how the exams would go. There are 2 ways to pass your exam. 1, you'll have to beat the teacher and put this. He held up a small device, which signifies that you've captured the villain. The second way is to run out of the gate and get back up in order to fight against the villain. Any questions? None. Okay, then Midoriya and Bakugo, you'll be the first ones to go. Now everyone, go get ready, he said. We're going first. But Izuku thought. He was exasperated because he knew his friend would never try to work with him. A slam on his desk brought Izuku back to reality. Come on, Deku, I don't want to fail my exam because of you. Izuku looked at him. We won't fail, Kaken, 'cause we got this. Katsuki let out a small tch sound. He may have seemed annoyed, but Izuku could tell he was excited to go against the #1 pro hero. He was as, maybe even more, excited than his partner. He was also prepared to be defeating All Might. Kaken and Deku stood side by side. They were both in their respective hero outfits, and were ready for the buzzer to go off so that they'd be able to begin. Kaken, you ready? Izuku asked as he cracked his knuckles after slamming them into one another. Demon right, and I'll beat All Might by myself. He seemed arrogant, but that wasn't very different from his normal attitude. Busy, the buzzer rang out and Izuku disappeared into the city in front of him, but was kicked down into the ground by something up above. BLD shot from Izuku's mouth as he collided into the ground. I told you tragedy would strike, so here I am, the man said. Izuku pushed himself out of the hole and wiped the BLD from his chin. He quickly delivered a powerful kick to the person's chin which sent him flying into the air. Izuku ran towards him and jump-kicked him into the wall of a nearby building. He should have been finished off, but he just cracked his neck and walked out of the wall like nothing happened. Meanwhile, in an observation room, Iida's face went completely pale. All the color had drained from his face as he stared at the screen. It was him, the man he was nearly killed by. What did he want with Yue? What the F? How did he served? His thoughts were interrupted by the man, who had appeared in front of him and delivered a kick to his Iki. Izuku flew faster than ever, and crashed through several building walls. Damn. He stood up and brushed himself off. He stared the man down as he said this. That hurt, but not as much as I'll hurt you. The air around Izuku became warped, as if he was putting off an aura of his own that interfered with it. The black lightning appeared when Izuku used more than 100% of his natural power. He knew he only had 3 minutes until he would break down and collapse. So he counted down in his head, 1, 2, 3. Izuku clenched his fist and ran at the man, quickly punching him in the stomach. But something metallic blocked his punch, and deflected the damage back by creating something that stabbed his fist. Though he did send the man, we'll refer to him as Tragedy, away, it didn't stop the pain that was now in his hand. He looked at his right hand. 2 of his fingers were cut off, the middle and ring finger specifically. He clutched his hand in agony as blood spurted out of the hole now in his hand. That of hurts. The teachers that were all gathered up in the exam room started to freak out as they saw Izuku fighting Tragedy. We have to go help him, Midnight said. The only person that would be able to help is All Might, shouted Aizawa. Nearly every other teacher agreed as they looked at the screen. The only thing we'd be able to do is stand in their way. At the moment, All Might had appeared on the screen. He had intercepted Tragedy with a well-timed punch and sent him flying. They couldn't see what was wrong with Izuku, nor could they hear what he said. Due to him using his full power, Izuku could perceive every movement around him, so he decided it would be the best to look at Tragedy. But he didn't see him move an inch. He just appeared in front of Izuku's eyes. 30 seconds have passed. Luckily, All Might had appeared to punch the man away, towards Bakugo. Are you able to fight? The only reason AM wasn't injured was because he took his fist away quickly, which sacrificed how far his foe was launched. Of course, this isn't too bad. Then get ready. The man appeared in front of All Might, which is what Izuku predicted, so he launched himself at the man. He kicked him away and went in for more. Running around while punching someone really drained his stamina and power. The last hit Izuku landed on him was a kick across his head, which lowered his hood. Tragedy wasn't a human, or at least mostly. He had a metallic substance covering over half of his face. The rest was skin, but it didn't have the same color. It was devoid of any red and was colorless. As if he wasn't a man, he was merely a machine. Now you've gone and done it. The man grabbed Izuku's leg right after he was kicked, causing him to plummet face first into the ground. He tore off his cloak to reveal that his whole body was machinery. Only a thin line of skin covered his entire body. It was thin enough to see the parts of metal behind it. He lifted his leg over Izuku's and was about to bring it down, but All Might flew towards him. Suddenly reality warped for Izuku and he was in a different place than near the building. The man was distracted, so Izuku took the chance to free himself from his grasp. He put his hands on the ground and pushed off of it into the man's face. Stupid F kid. He was going to punch Izuku in the back, but All Might had punched him in the back, launching him into the distance. Izuku knew after he was moved what the villain's power was. It was either time, or he could just teleport. He should have been terrified. Should have run away. But as a hero, he has to protect Yue and his classmates, more importantly. His mate. The one he wished to grow old with. The one he'd never forget. All Might, he can move long distances quickly because of his quirk. Izuku shouted. He already ran off before AM could speak. Before Tragedy's hood was torn off, where the students were everyone was shouting, they had to do something in order to save Izuku. We have to go help him. From Denki Kaminari, no way. We die if we did. From the cowardly Mineta Minoru, but we have to. It's our duty as heroes. Momo said she just didn't want him to die on her, especially after not seeing each other in a while. Whoever wants to save Izuku will come with me. The rest of you cowards will dash, you will die. Iida said grimly, interrupting 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏. That thing isn't human, or at least made of fear and machine. You won't stand a chance against him. Hell, I almost lost the ability to use my engines after running away. His face was whiter than a ghost. He truly was terrified. And if I have to, I will stop you from leaving. This was his duty. His duty as a class president, who couldn't bear to see a fellow classmate die. And his duty as a friend. Realistically, they just get in the way of Izuku and All Might fighting. I will use force if I have to. Momo wanted to say something, but as she looked at the feed of the city, she could tell that they'd be walking into their deaths. Oh yeah, and what about it, Iida? Will you really go against half of the class? 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 asked him. He personally was against leaving. Yes, I will do everything in my power to stop you from leaving, even if it ends in my death. He stood in front of the only exit and entrance from the room. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 scoffed and walked towards Iida, opposing him with half of the class behind him and backing him up. Step aside, Iida. I can't let you guys die, was all he said before 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 sent his fist into his friend's face. Or so he thought. His fist actually collided with something made of metal. And it was produced by Momo. You guys need to listen to Iida. See. She pointed her hand to the screen. Izuku's was almost sent flying again by the man. But All Might had punched him in the back, which sent him away. Izuku said something, then disappeared by running to where the man was. All Might followed behind, but was much slower. Back to the strong 𝗵𝗃𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏 squad's tragedy was still flying in the air when Izuku jumped up. He currently had about a minute before he broke himself. He grabbed the man's 𝗧𝗏𝗏𝗏 and twisted in the air, tilting him towards the ground. He plummeted with the man. His face was slammed down into the ground. Just die. Izuku shouted as he grabbed the man's legs. He pulled him out of the ground and repeatedly slammed him into the ground. I can't die, not until I get what I came for, he said in a raspy voice as he extended his arm for Izuku's face. Izuku stood there, petrified. What? Why me? Why can't I even move? Oh God, no. Oh God. He was saved. And yet again, it was from All Might, who had drop-kicked him into the distance. 30 seconds left. He was going to thank All Might, but the only thing that came out of his mouth was a scream of absolute terror. He stood and watched. Watched the man appear behind All Might. Watched him smile as he took his fist. And watched as he plunged it into All Might's 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏. Another voice screamed alongside Izuku, All Might. It was Katsuki, and he ran to All Might as he fell to the ground. The man had appeared behind Izuku this time. He turned his back and quickly kicked him away. Kaken, give me your gauntlets. He shouted because he had an idea, one that could win him the battle. But Katsuki wasn't paying attention. He was trying to wake All Might up, as if he was asleep and not dead. He had 15 seconds left. Katsuki, his death will be in vain if you don't give those to me now. He snapped out of his trance and unlatched the gauntlets from his forearms. He then tossed them to Izuku, who caught them and quickly put them on his own arms. He grabbed the man by the neck as he appeared behind him. He had gotten fairly good at telling where the man would appear next. He then threw him into the ground and held him there. 5 seconds left. He pulled one pin 4 seconds and then the other 3 seconds. This is for All Might. 2 seconds left. The gauntlets were pointed at his face as they glowed. 1 second. UFB. Strong explosions shot out of Kaken's gauntlets, blasting the man's head clean off. 0 seconds. Izuku was blasted backwards by the strong explosions. When he hit the floor, he could feel his arms were broken. There was no getting up for the man nor himself, or so he thought. Ha ha ha. You think that would have stopped me? Izuku heard the shifting of metal. You killed All Might. She heard him hit Katsuki, most likely on the head to knock him out. You can't kill God. You can't kill the devil. And you can't kill the ultimate evil. He stood directly over Izuku. Now you're coming with me. He raised his foot. I'm sorry everyone, I failed. Tragedy slammed his foot down onto Izuku's face, breaking his nose and knocking him out. This was the first loss for Izuku. He had been bested by someone stronger than him. And so, the victor decided he'd take a trophy, which was Izuku himself. This was too easy. He was about to use his ability to teleport away, but a cannonball came from nowhere. It would have hit him head-on if he didn't step out of its way. There are more of these shitty kids. Why do they not give up? He brought his fist back. Whatever, they won't even stand a chance. He punched nothing in front of him, but the amount of wind that was generated was immense. It was enough to knock all the students that had come to help him in an instant. All except one. One that had created an ice bridge-like structure that twisted him around. It would have gotten him far enough to grab Izuku, and he nearly did. He was within an arm's length of his friend. But what he grabbed wasn't Izuku, or should I say what grabbed him wasn't Izuku. You think you had any chance against me? He grabbed Todoroki's arm and swung him into the ground. 'Cause that's really cute. He then let go of his hand. Izuku is mine now. He waved at the incapacitated 𝗧𝗪𝗧 and suddenly disappeared. There was no hope left. This man of pure evil killed the #1 hero with one blow and took possibly the strongest person to ever live. There was no way to stop him. The only person that could was taken by him. Tragedy had teleported onto the roof of a building above, then to a moving truck he saw in the distance. Now I get to do what I want. Izuku, you'll be better than ever before after this. He teleported through the entire city and most of Japan, until he got to a forest that was overlooked by a cliff. It took a few hours to get there, and he knew that Izuku wouldn't wake up anytime soon. He had been banking this entire plan on Izuku going beyond his limits. He crossed most of the forest in what felt like 2 seconds, and stopped at a random tree. He pulled a random branch down and a passage in the ground opened up. When the authorities arrived, Momo sat alone on the ground. Tears flowed from her eyes. She had come too late to save Izuku. After 𝗧𝗪𝗧 convinced her to help him with rescuing her boyfriend, she became determined that they could fight off the man and defeat him easily. They were wrong. And they paid for it. Multiple students had broken an arm or more, but that's not all. Every student became traumatized in one way or another, mostly one way. They had all seen All Might's dead body, just laying there, completely drained of life. Why? Why Izuku of all people? That was the only thought that went through her mind. Why just a child in training? When his mother arrived, she felt even worse. Her tears flowed faster and harder from her eyes as she grieved over her lover's death, and quite possibly Izuku's. 𝗧𝗪𝗧 had been talking with the authorities during the whole thing, so she had no one except Iida to comfort her. This was because he was Izuku's best friend, along with Todoroki. I'm going to get him back, Iida, she randomly said through her tears. Even if he's dead, I want to know what happened. I swear, I will do everything in my power to save you, Izuku. I won't give up, and neither will you. Because you are my hope and savior. Back with Tragedy and Izuku, you'll be in for a treat after you see what I have for you, Izuku my son. He walked into the passage and darkness consumed the two as it closed behind them. Welcome to my villainous abode. There were 2 doors that led to the same room when the man flicked a SW. He went into the room. In the center was a single chair with specks of dried BLD dotted around and on it. You'll really love your long stay here, I promise. The man said creepily as he tied an unconscious Izuku into the chair. By the way, Izuku, my name is Cronus, and within time you'll come to treat me like your father. He was basically a god among men, which is why he named himself after the god of all titans. But where had he come from? He was certainly a machine, but what type of AI went rampant and thought they were human enough? Izuku wouldn't come to appear about 3 years after he was kidnapped, nearly exact to the date. He appeared one day, broken and battered at the door of the UA dorms, where they were resting at night.